Why do you yell at your child when he yells at you? Why do you lose control at the exact moment you're supposed to be the safe harbor? Why does a child's tantrum trigger a rage in you that seems to come from a much older place than that moment? The answer is buried in your own childhood, and you've just repeated the pattern. Carl Jung spent decades investigating the labyrinths of the human psyche and discovered something unsettling about parenting. We don't raise our children from a place of consciousness. We raise them from the shadow. The parental shadow is the living archive of all our unhealed wounds, of all the screams we heard, of all the times we were silenced when we needed to be seen. And when our child has a crisis, when they cry, scream, throw themselves on the floor, something inside us awakens. It's not our adult, conscious version. It's the wounded child who still lives inside us, desperate, scared, out of control. Your child's tantrum isn't the problem. The problem is that you never learned to handle your own emotional storm. So, when their storm begins, yours does too. And there, in that moment of chaos, two children are screaming. But only one of them is 3, 4, 5 years old. The other one is your age, but has never emotionally grown in this aspect. Jung revealed that unconscious patterns are passed down from generation to generation, like an invisible inheritance. You received it from your parents. Your parents received it from their parents. And now, without realizing it, you are planting the same seeds in your child's psyche. The child who cries isn't being difficult. They are being honest. Their body is saying what their mouth doesn't yet know how to name. And you, faced with this brutal honesty, panic, because no one taught you to hold emotional chaos. No one showed you that feeling is safe. So you do what you learned. You control, you punish, you silence, you yell. But there is a choice. There is always a choice. And that choice begins with a pause in the middle of the hurricane. A pause where you recognize, this isn't about their tantrum. This is about my inability to be present with emotional discomfort. Conscious parenting isn't about having children who never cry. It's about being the adult capable of holding the crying. It's about healing your own wound so you don't pass it on. It's about looking at the child's emotional storm and, instead of collapsing with them, becoming the lighthouse, the steady presence, the safe ground. In this script, you will discover 5 parenting rules that Carl Jung never wrote down explicitly, but which emerge from his entire body of work on the shadow, projection, and individuation. 5 rules that will completely transform the way you respond to your child's crises and tantrums. Because when you understand what's really happening in the child's psyche and in your own, everything changes. But before we continue, you need to be willing to look in the mirror. You need to be willing to see what you have been repeating without realizing it. Look at your child's last tantrum. Recall the scene with honesty. The child screaming, crying, struggling. And you, what did you do? What was your first reaction? Was it patience and presence, or was it anger, despair, shame, fear? How many times have you said the phrase your parents said to you? Stop crying right now. You're making a scene. You're embarrassing me. If you don't stop, you're going to get it, too. How many times have you used the same words that hurt you, that made you feel small, wrong, inadequate? Do you remember the feeling of not being seen, of not being understood? You're doing it now, with your child. You have become the parental mirror that reflects the very thing you swore you would never do. How many times have you punished the emotion instead of comforting the child? How many times have you treated the tantrum as misbehavior, as rebellion, as manipulation, when in reality it was just a desperate plea for emotional help? The child doesn't know how to say, I'm overwhelmed, I'm scared, I'm confused, I need you. So the body speaks, the scream speaks, the fall to the floor speaks. And you, instead of translating this language, punish it. Do you recognize the pattern? Can you see that in that moment of crisis you are not the conscious adult? You are the wounded child reacting to the wounded child. 2 shadows dancing with each other. 2 storms colliding. And in the middle of this collision, your child's psyche is being shaped. It is learning that feeling is dangerous, that expressing emotion is unacceptable, that they need to wear a mask to be loved. While you react from your unhealed wound, the child internalizes shame. While you project onto your child your own inability to handle intense emotions, their true self goes into hiding. While you control instead of connect, trust is broken. And this isn't about blame. It's about unconsciousness. You didn't know, but now you are beginning to know. Most parents believe that a tantrum is a behavior problem, that it needs to be corrected, disciplined, eliminated. But Jung shows us something else. The tantrum is the language of the child's unconscious trying to communicate. It's the child's psyche asking to be seen, held, understood. And when you respond with control, with anger, with punishment, you are telling the child, your feelings don't matter. You don't matter. Learn to hide. And so the child learns. They learn to suffocate. They learn to develop a persona, a social mask that hides their emotional truth. They learn to disconnect from themselves to be accepted by you. And this disconnection will follow them for their entire life, until one day as an adult, they're in therapy trying to understand why they can't feel, why they can't express themselves, why they carry so much repressed anger. Do you see the cycle? Do you see the generational repetition? Are you ready to break it? Because the change doesn't start with the child. The change starts with you, with your willingness to look at your own parental shadow and say, I inherited this wound, but it doesn't have to be the legacy I leave behind. Now you need to understand why this happens, why your child's tantrum destabilizes you so much, why you lose control, why you react instead of respond. The answer lies in a central concept of Jungian psychology: projection. Projection is the unconscious mechanism by which you attribute to others what you cannot recognize or integrate in yourself. When the child enters an emotional crisis, they are simply being what you don't allow yourself to be: vulnerable, uncontrolled, honest, intense. And this triggers a deep psychic alarm in you, because you were taught to suffocate. You were taught that feeling intensely is wrong, that crying is weakness, that losing control is shameful. So you developed a rigid persona, a controlled self that keeps emotions locked in the basement of the psyche. And when your child freely expresses what you had to repress, something inside you panics. It's not about them. It's about you seeing, in their behavior, the rejected part of yourself. Jung called these rejected parts the shadow. And the shadow doesn't disappear just because you ignore it. It stays there in the unconscious, waiting. And when the child acts in a way that mirrors your own unintegrated shadow, you react with disproportionate intensity. You yell, you punish, you control, not because the child is doing something so terrible, but because they are touching an old wound inside of you. A child's tantrum works like an emotional storm. Every storm has an eye, a center, a core. The core of a tantrum isn't rebellion. It's emotional regulation that is still developing. The child's brain, especially up to age 7, doesn't have the full capacity to regulate intense emotions. The amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for emotional reactions, is hyperactive. The prefrontal cortex responsible for self-control and reasoning is still forming. So when the child feels overwhelmed by frustration, fatigue, hunger, or fear, their nervous system goes into meltdown, and the storm happens. But here is the truth that few parents understand. The child doesn't need you to control the storm. They need you to be the steady ground in the middle of the storm. They need a regulated nervous system to help regulate their dysregulated nervous system. They need presence, not punishment. Connection, not correction. You are the child's emotional environment. If you collapse along with them, if you scream, if you despair, you are adding more chaos to the chaos. But if you can pause, breathe, and hold the moment without reacting, you are offering the child what they need most: the experience that it is safe to feel, that they can have an emotional storm and still be loved, seen, and held. That's the principle. Now let's get to the 5 rules. Rule 1. Don't enter the storm. Be the lighthouse. When the child is in the midst of an emotional crisis, the worst mistake you can make is to enter the same emotional state as them. If they scream and you scream back, if they lose control and you lose control, you are both drowning. Jung always emphasized the importance of the observer's consciousness. You need to become the conscious observer of the scene, not the reactive participant. Take a deep breath. Literally. 3 deep breaths before any word, any action. Your nervous system needs to be regulated so you can be their anchor. The child is learning, through you, how to navigate intense emotions. If you show panic, they learn that intense emotions are threatening. If you show calm presence, they learn that it's possible to feel deeply and still be safe. Rule 2. Validate before you correct. A child in crisis doesn't need logic. They need emotional validation. Saying, I see you're very angry right now. I understand this is hard for you. I'm here with you. changes everything. Because you are telling the child, your feelings are real. You are not wrong for feeling them. I will not abandon you because of them. Jung understood that the psyche needs recognition. The child whose emotion is validated develops an integrated self. The child whose emotion is denied, ridiculed, or punished develops a fragmented self, a false persona that hides their emotional truth. Validating is not agreeing with the behavior. Validating is acknowledging the emotion behind the behavior. You can say, I see you're frustrated because you can't have more candy. I get it. And still hold the boundary. You aren't giving in. You are connecting. And it's in connection that emotional regulation happens. Rule 3. Name the emotion. Give language to the chaos. A young child doesn't know what they're feeling. They just know that something intense is happening inside them and it's scary. When you name the emotion, you are giving their brain a tool for psychic organization. You're angry. You're frustrated. You're scared. You're tired. This simple naming activates the prefrontal cortex, the rational part of the brain, and begins to decrease the activation of the amygdala, the emotional part. Jung spoke about the importance of bringing the unconscious into consciousness. Naming the emotion is doing exactly that. It's taking the feeling out of the realm of unconscious chaos and bringing it into the light of awareness. And when a child learns to name what they feel, they are developing emotional intelligence. They are learning the language of the psyche. They are becoming self-aware. Most parents jump straight to behavioral correction. Stop crying. Behave. Go to your room. But a child who hasn't learned to name and understand their emotions will carry them in a disorganized way for the rest of their life. They will become an adult who explodes without understanding why, who disconnects from themselves, who doesn't know what they feel. And then, decades later, they're sitting in front of a therapist trying to learn what they should have learned in childhood, how to be present with their own emotional experience. Rule 4. Offer physical presence. Embody safety. Jung knew that the psyche is not just mental, it is embodied. The body holds experience, and a child in crisis is living an intense somatic experience. Their nervous system is in fight or flight mode, and what calms the nervous system isn't words. It's physical presence, it's touch, it's proximity. Some children want to be held, others don't want to be touched in the moment of crisis, but they want you to be near. Respect what the child asks for, but don't walk away completely. Sitting next to them on the floor in silence is a revolutionary act. You are saying with your body, I will not leave. You can have this storm. I am here. The child whose body learns there is a safe place to fall apart develops emotional resilience. The child who is isolated, sent to their room, left alone with the storm, develops the unconscious belief that they have to handle everything alone. That vulnerability is loneliness, and that becomes the shadow they will carry into their adult life. Rule 5. After the storm, reconnect. Don't shame. Here is the most subtle and most devastating mistake. After the crisis passes, after the child calms down, many parents try to teach a lesson. See how ugly you looked crying like that? You won't get anywhere with tantrums. Everyone was looking at you. These phrases plant shame in the child's psyche, and shame is the poison of individuation. Jung understood that shame disconnects the child from their true self. They learn that parts of them are unacceptable, dirty, wrong, and so they hide. They develop a mask. They become what their parents approve of, instead of who they truly are. After the storm, what the child needs is loving reconnection. A hug, a gentle look, a simple phrase. That was hard, wasn't it? I know. It's okay now. You're safe. This seals the experience with love, not with shame. The child learns that they can have intense emotions and still be worthy of love, that their parents' love is not conditional on emotional control, that they can be seen in their entirety, including their most vulnerable and disorganized parts. And here is the 5th rule in its deepest form. You are not raising a well-behaved child. You are raising an emotionally integrated human being. Behavior is the surface. The psyche is the depth. If you focus only on behavior, you create a child who behaves well out of fear, shame, or the need for approval. But their shadow is there, repressed, waiting, and one day it will emerge. In adolescence, in adulthood, in relationships, in therapy. But if you focus on emotional integration, if you teach the child to feel, name, express, and regulate their emotions in a healthy way, you are giving them the greatest gift possible, the ability to be themselves, fully, without masks, without fragmentation. And this is individuation. This is what Jung dedicated his entire life to understanding, the journey of becoming who you truly are. Now that you know the 5 rules, the real question is, can you apply them? Because intellectual knowledge doesn't change the pattern. The pattern is engraved in your nervous system. It's engraved in your own unhealed shadow. So the practice of conscious parenting begins with the practice of self-inquiry. Here's the exercise. Get a journal, or open a document, and ask yourself these questions with brutal honesty, without judgment, without defense, just truth. First question, what emotion does my child's tantrum trigger in me? Not the emotion I think I should feel, the emotion I actually feel. Anger, shame, fear, despair, helplessness. Write it down, name it, bring it to consciousness. Second question, when I was a child, what happened when I cried, screamed, or lost control? How did my parents react? What did I learn about expressing intense emotions? This is the root. This is the inherited shadow. You are seeing where your pattern comes from. Third question, what did the wounded child inside of me need to hear in those moments of crisis and never heard? Write down the words you needed. It's okay. I see you. You are safe. I won't leave. These are the words you need to give your child now. But first, you need to give them to your own inner child. Fourth question, how do I feel when my child loses control in public? This question reveals the layer of social shame, the concern about what others think, the fear of being judged as a bad father, a bad mother. And here's the truth. You cannot hold your child's emotional storm if you are worried about the opinions of strangers. You have to choose your child's psyche or the approval of others. Fifth question, am I willing to pause, breathe, and consciously choose my response in the next crisis? This is not a theoretical exercise. It's a commitment. It's you saying, I will break the pattern. I will be the conscious adult my child needs even when it's hard, even when my own shadow screams. The integration of the parental shadow doesn't happen all at once. It happens crisis by crisis, tantrum by tantrum, moment by moment. You will make mistakes, you will yell, you will react, and then you will pause, recognize, and repair. You will say to your child, I made a mistake. I yelled at you, and it wasn't fair. You didn't deserve that. I'm learning to do better. This act of repair is profoundly healing, because you are showing the child that adults also make mistakes, also feel, also need to grow. And that making a mistake doesn't mean you aren't loved. Jung said there is no individuation without conscious suffering. And conscious parenting is exactly that. It is the conscious suffering of looking at your own wound, acknowledging it, feeling it, and choosing not to pass it on. It is the hardest work, but also the most sacred, because you are not just raising a child. You are breaking a generational cycle. You are healing not only the future but also the past. You've made it this far. And that means something. It means you are no longer unconscious. You can no longer pretend you don't see the pattern. You can no longer react without knowing where the reaction comes from. You have woken up, and there is no going back to sleep. The next time your child has a crisis, you will remember. You will remember that their storm is not about you. You will remember that they are not trying to manipulate you, shame you, or defy you. They are just being a child with a developing brain, trying to navigate emotions that are too big for their small body. And you, for the first time, have the chance to respond instead of react. You are now the conscious observer of your own story. You see where the yelling, the punishments, the despair came from. You see the wounded child inside you who was never held, who was never seen. And you have a choice. You can continue to react from that wound, or you can begin to heal it. And by healing it in yourself, you also heal it in your child. You are no longer the repetition. You are the cycle breaker. You are the first generation in your family line that chose consciousness over automatic behavior, that chose presence over projection, that chose to welcome the storm instead of punishing it. Your child will have tantrums. That won't change, because tantrums are part of human development. But what will change is how those tantrums are received. And that change, that loving presence in the middle of the chaos, will shape their psyche in a way you might only understand decades later, when they are an adult capable of feeling fully, of expressing themselves honestly, of being present with themselves. And then you will understand. You didn't raise a well-behaved child. You raised a whole human being. The 5 rules you learned today are not techniques. They are invitations to transformation. Invitations for you to become the father, the mother, the caregiver that your own inner child needed. And in doing so, you are giving your child the most precious thing there is, the freedom to be. Now, a question for you. Of the 5 rules we explored today, which one resonated the most? Which one revealed something about yourself that you hadn't seen before? Comment below. Leave your reflection. Because when you write, when you name, you bring it to consciousness. And it is in consciousness that change happens. If this script awakened something in you, if you felt the weight of responsibility and also the hope of transformation, leave a like. Because you are saying, I see, I acknowledge, I am willing. And if you want to continue this journey of conscious parenting, if you want to explore more deeply the unconscious patterns that shape your relationship with your children, subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell. Because this is just the first layer. There is much more to uncover. The journey of becoming a conscious father, a conscious mother, doesn't end here. In fact, it's just beginning. And every crisis, every tantrum, every difficult moment is an opportunity to choose differently, to be different, to heal, allow the child to feel, allow the child to be, allow the child to flourish.